1. Blog Talk Radio.
Constitutionalists, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. This is episode 795. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is May 9th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we are hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God's still in control, and he does love you. And we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show, knowing the fear of the Lord. We persuade men or folks of the truth, whether it's biblical truth or political truth or truth in life in general. I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful, sunny Central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State, sitting before the great John Wayne desk. I don't stand much anymore during the show because I'm standing between 2 and 3 hours in show prep before the show, sometimes on my wobble board to help me get a little more exercise that I need, and sometimes not, depending on how my legs feel. So I've been really trying to stand on the wobble board last week and this week, and I'm able to stand on it longer, and so hopefully, that'll help me. I haven't gained any weight since I've been out of work. Of course, since my output hasn't been as much as far as energy and stuff like that, other than trying to control the pain. My intake, I'm not near as hungry as I used to be. Let me put it to you simply there. So I'm not eating as much as I used to. But with that being said, I do have the chat room open up over at Blog Talk Radio, and I also have the chat room opened up, the live chat at my YouTube channel, The Dan Clements Show, on YouTube. So all you got to do is just look that up, and you'll see that. Yesterday on the show, I think we had a good show. We're talking about healthcare, and we're talking about some of the lies that were going around about that. I have an article. I'm not going to read it today, but I talked a little bit about this today and had links up to the video of Representative Raul Labrador of Idaho. There's a Breitbart article out. I've been telling you guys this for a long time, ever since this ACHA, the Ryan Care, was first put forward. And everybody's been globbing on this pre-existing conditions. And the only thing the ACHA does is revert back to the states and what their laws were for pre-existing conditions. So, again, Obamacare, how do I want to say this and put it, they took authority, and I can't remember, for whatever reason, I just had a brain fart, and I could not get the word out. They took, they usurped the state's authority. That's the word I was looking for. And today's word is usurp. Obamacare usurped the state's authority when it came to health care, among other things. But to me, that was the most egregious. And the only thing and I don't agree with the ACHA. I don't. I think they should just repeal Obamacare, use the Commerce Clause to get rid of the portability laws to make health insurance able to buy across state lines, bring more competition in, authorize the states, not the federal government, but the states. I don't even think they have to authorize this. I think we're big boys and girls out here. We can really push towards. I think competition will actually push us towards medical savings accounts with a high rider on it. Or not a high rider, but what they call a catastrophic rider on it. You can get different levels of catastrophic care. Now, I'm going to be doing a video on a story, and it was posted up on Vox. Now, Vox is a very anti-freedom leaning group out there in that they, if you tell lies, if you tell political lies, I got to put you in the category of anti-freedom, because freedom and liberty, in order for them to exist properly, in order for people to exercise them properly, they have to be based on the truth. They have to be based on some type of moral code. And when you lie to somebody, or you use your platform as propaganda to perpetrate lies, I have to put you in that anti-freedom group. Like I said, if you've listened to the show in the past and you're just coming back listening, and you haven't heard me talk about the left or right paradigm, it's because I'm getting away from that, because there are folks that I consider to be conservative on most things, but on some things they are very left-leaning, and so and this is a problem we have today in our politics in the country. Because people put party, and Chris Ann Hall talks about this a lot, people put party ahead of principle. And when you put party ahead of principle, you will allow a lot of bad things to go on. Instead of putting principle before party, if you're a principled person and somebody in your party does something that's unprincipled, you should be able to criticize them for that, and you should be able to take steps within the party to have that taken care of, to have that corrected, as it were. But too many people I see out there, and this happens both in the Republican and the Democrat Party, too many folks out there, they put party over everything else. And this is why we're in the mess we're in today. These folks that don't like Donald Trump wanted to see either Bernie or Hillary to get in there, and they don't realize that Hillary, and one of their statements they make is that, well, Trump's not a politician, and he made a comment, which I'm glad he made. I'm really glad he said that governing is harder than he thought it was going to be. Because to me, it shows his humility. It doesn't. Now, those folks in the anti-freedom crowd, they want to jump on that and make it something different than what it is. And I'm kind of glad he actually said that it's harder than what he thought it was going to be. Because if he was a true politician, I don't remember any politicians in my lifetime that attained the position of President of the United States that actually said that this is easier than I thought it was going to be, or harder than I thought it was going to be. They don't comment on that. Matter of fact, a lot of them go into the presidency because they have the political credentials, as it were, the bona fides, and they think that qualifies them for president, when actually, in my mind, it doesn't, because they have been so warped in their thinking because of party politics, because they don't stand on principle, because they don't have a morality that guides them, and they get into all sorts of trouble and they do all sorts of the wrong things. It's just like Paul Ryan's stance on the health care, on taxes. If you want to go the left-right paradigm, he's a centrist to a moderate at best. He's not a conservative. I don't think he ever has been a conservative. And the Republicans putting forth this idea that they have to replace Obamacare instead of just repealing it, let the states take care of it as they're supposed to. And honestly, Donald Trump talks more about the states taking care of these things than most any other politician out there. And I think he's absolutely correct in this. I think he's correct when he talks about states ought to be the ones that decide about marijuana and about using it, for medicinal purposes. I don't, and folks, don't get me wrong here. Not that I want to see everybody walking around smoking a doobie. However, if you're going to condemn recreational use of marijuana, you need to, in the same breath, in the same sentence, before you put a period behind it, condemn the recreational use of alcohol. But we don't hear that too much anymore. And this is a complicated situation. What happened during Prohibition in this country that prohibited alcohol? Well, it created a black market. And what happens in a black market? Well, it operates outside the law, and when it operates outside the law, it's a law unto itself, and we've seen a lot of evils that were perpetrated by folks like Al Capone. The same thing with marijuana. We have a prohibition on marijuana, and that prohibition extended over into hemp. And I should do a show strictly just on hemp, talking about the history of the hemp and its uses today, what it was back then. Money used to be made with hemp paper. One of the biggest industries when sailing ships were the norm of the sea, one of the biggest industries in the colonies, and it was mandated by the British government, by the crown, the production of hemp because of hemp ropes. And if you ever looked at an old-time sailing ship, they had a lot of rope on there that were actually on the rigging, plus they had a lot of rope in storage to replace some if it got broke in battle or something like that. So, but because of the prohibition on marijuana, they prohibited hemp production. And I believe that crippled farmers, the economy of the farmers, because it limited their choices of what they could actually grow. Now we see a huge movement in the country that's going back against that. We see countries like Portugal, who has successfully decriminalized. I won't say legalized what they've done, and I think libertarians need to be careful with their wording here. Libertarians say, well, they legalized drugs. Well, they didn't legalize drugs. They decriminalized the drug use on the user's end. They still go after drug dealers, and they still go after smugglers that smuggle the drugs into the country. But instead of locking up people who are using, they put them in treatment programs to try to get them off. And it's been very successful over in Portugal. And I think the same approach can happen here. I think we've got way too many people in prisons, state or federal or otherwise, because they're addicted to drugs and they're using it. We don't put people in jail who are addicted to alcohol unless they do something like drive while under the influence, things like that, or steal or whatever, But we tend to want to do that to drug users, and I think we've had enough of empirical evidence that shows that that's not working. So we should try something else. And I'm all about the freedom and liberty, folks. I really am. I think freedom's a state of mind and a way of life. I think freedom and liberty are a state of mind and a way of life. When I say freedom, you can bet I'm talking about liberty at the same time. So I don't always use the two terms together. But when I'm talking about either or, I'm talking about liberty, I'm definitely talking about freedom. That's included in my discussion there. I don't have to repeat that every day. So it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me how far we've come in this country when our country was founded on the ideas of freedom and liberty, that governments were instituted to protect these God-given rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It amazes me how far down we've come off the freedom and liberty scale. And it's mostly due to politics, and it's mostly due to this idea of, I guess the best way we can put this is identity politics. And I see here I don't have a, let me get back over here. I want to make sure I get this, for some reason, I had an issue, my Open Office crashed on me, and I had to restart everything back up with that. But anyway, the state of mind that we have in this country, it's a victimhood. Everybody wants to be a victim. It's the ultimate status symbol, according to this article, fee.org by Sean Rife. Victimhood has become the ultimate status symbol. And to a guy like me, who is a freedom and liberty lover, I have never thought of myself as a victim. Never, ever, 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 ever thought of myself as a victim. Doesn't matter what stage of life I've been in. Doesn't matter how far down I feel or how oppressed I felt, which, that, to me, I know there's oppression that goes on out there. Don't get me wrong here. But I still think oppression is also a state of mind also. Because if it wasn't just a state of mind, especially back during the slave era, and I'm thinking of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad and runaway slaves and stuff like that, if oppression just wasn't a state of mind. I know it can be a physical reality that you're being oppressed. You're enslaved. However, if you let that seep into your every waking thought, then that actually goes over into this victimhood thing. And you talk to a runaway slave, yeah, they may have felt that they were a victim of circumstances, but they never internalized that, and they always sought for freedom. They always sought for liberty. And in the United States of America, the status of freedom, or the state of freedom and liberty, is unique in the world. Our country was founded on some unique propositions, like man is sovereign. You know, that God is sovereign over the universe, and man is sovereign below God over his lot in life. Up until the United States of America was established, sovereigns were always the head of state. Whether they're monarchs or dictators or tyrants or whoever they were considered, the sovereigns were considered the head of state. And in the United States, they actually, you know, and Chris Ann Hall does a really good job about this, about teaching some of the history leading up to and including the Constitution, but no other country in the world actually quantified that in law, that the citizen is sovereign, that the people of the United States are sovereign citizens, and they are sovereign over the government, the local, state, and federal government. And it's been in the past 100 years or so that the political forces out there have gotten people to forget about this, forget about their station in life when it comes to the United States of America, forget about the power they have over government, and actually start making them more reliable on government to fix every problem in their lives. And it comes from this victimhood. It comes from being considered a victim. And when you're a victim, and I'll read through this article. I think it's a very good article. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna start off the show with that, and I'll give you some other things that we're talking about here. But being a victim seems to be in vogue nowadays, and I don't know about any of my listeners. I'm pretty sure Dave's never thought of himself as a victim, unless it comes to his follicles. But you know, that's a whole other story there. Alrighty, today's show's being not being brought to you by, but Rocky Mountain High Brands is the official drink of the Dan Clements Show, and they have not only drinks, but they have some energy bars that are hemp oil infused. They're bringing out it's called Eagle Water, I believe it is. It's one of those mineral waters they're bringing out that's high in alkaline. You know, it'll change your body pH to alkaline instead of acidic. And it's supposed to be real healthy for you. They're bringing out all these lines. So this is Rocky Mountain High Brands is the official drink of the Dan Clements Show. And today's daily Bible reading comes from 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. And folks, can I say just one thing about Christianity? And I'm doing I'm actually working on a young man named Hunter Avalon posted a video. He's very confused about Christianity. He doesn't see the logic in Christianity or the Bible, and he sees I think it's mainly from a denominational point of view. He sees all these denominations out there saying what is or what isn't biblical, when you can actually go to the Bible and study it for yourself to find out if what you were being taught all your life is actually in line with the Bible. I grew up Catholic. And when I became adult, and through the help of Alan Holte and Dave, they helped me see the truth of the Scriptures. And when I read through the New Testament and didn't find anything in the New Testament that authorized the Catholic Church, I got pretty mad. And I really started studying then to see what the Bible had to say about my salvation and about where I needed to be in relationship with God. So John talks about this. You know, the love of the world really has a lot to do with this, folks. C.S. Lewis has the quote meal of the day: Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. Christianity always has been and always will be an either or. You know, either you're for it or you're against it. There's no middle ground on Christianity. And today's short Bible lesson actually comes from answersingenesis.org, Ken Ham's website. And it's by Avery Foley, and it's gay right activist bully, author of LGBT study. And the gist of the article is this author of this LGBT study was using science, which I thought the anti-freedom crowds out there was saying science is where it's at. We need to use science. And they don't recognize that Christianity and science can harmonize with each other. And they're actually, instead of sitting down and having a talk, and we're going to talk about this is all going to come up in this victimhood thing we're going to talk about today, that instead of sitting down and discussing these things, they're bullying them. They're just absolute bullying the author of this study. And that's where politics are at today. If you disagree with somebody, instead of sitting down debating it or talking about it, discussing it, hashing it out, people want to bully people. They want to physically threaten them, and because they disagree with a position, instead of talking out and trying to reason things out. And that is where the state of politics today. We don't have any civil discourse anymore. You know, it's all uncivil. Not all, but it seems like on the news every day, you see these protesters out in California especially, that it's not that they don't want free speech, as they don't want people that they disagree with to have free speech. They want to have free speech for themselves, but they want to deny it to people that disagree with them. I have to read this thing from Dave, because him and I, we joke around about hair all the time. Probably me more so than he does. But he said, disregarding the hair reference again, victimhood is often an inherited mindset, and it's tough to separate yourself from your parents' way of thinking. And he's absolutely right. It's just like, and the anti-freedom crowd out there will deny this, but just like welfare is generational, and there is some good evidence out there that it is. There is a woman, Star Parker. She has her own website. She came out of this generational welfare out in California. And she understands now how bad that was. And so victimhood is tough because you don't want to go against what your parents taught you. And that is true, or their way of thinking. You want to, you know, and this again goes to this mindset that has been going on for like 100 years. In order for the government to do what they're doing today, they have to make everybody a victim. And today it's almost like I said, victimhood is in vogue. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate in your self-expression. It's the ultimate status symbol that I'm a victim. And honestly, personally, me, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I really do. Because my dad, even though my dad may not be, you know, the richest guy or the most successful guy in the world, he had some very intelligent things to tell me when I was growing up. And one that I remember, and I'll remember to the day I die, and I've tried to pass it on to my son, that the only person in your way that's in your way that's going to hold you back from success is yourself. That's the only person. If there's other people trying to keep you down out there, go around them. Go through them, go over them, or go around them, or go under them. But don't let them stop you. And this is where this victimhood thing comes in to play. Now this, Sean Reif talks about this. He says, in recent years, campus activists have become an increasingly visible aspect of American life. In 2015, Yale professor Nicholas and Erica Christakis came under fire for encouraging students to critically consider a new policy on Halloween costumes. The controversy reached a boiling point when Nicholas Christakis met student demonstrators in a courtyard and attempted to engage them in discussion. More recently, the American Enterprise Institute, scholar Charles Murray, and Middlebury College professor Allison Stranger were assaulted shortly after they were driven out of a lecture hall where Murray was scheduled to speak. The protesters succeeded in shutting down the talk by simply speaking over them. This behavior is condemnable for a host of reasons, the least of which is that much of what the protesters are shouting is just factually incorrect. For example, Murray has long supported gay marriage, but the chant racist, sexist, and anti-gay is simply too good to pass up. That the protesters eventually resorted to violence speaks to their moral certitude, a phenomenon that can be observed in other similar protests, which is all the more troubling. And yet, there are seemingly respectable people willing to defend this kind of savagery. Writing for Slate, Osita Nuwanivu argued that protesters were correct and presumably the violence that they employed was acceptable because Trump, in the Trump era, should we side with those who insist that the bigoted must traipse unhindered through our halls of learning? And that's a question she has, and or should we dare to disagree? At Inside Higher Education, John Patrick Leary quipped that the protesters had every right to shout him down. It's this, and this is in academia, folks. This is America academia and higher learning that this stuff is going on, that this is actually being encouraged. Disagreement's one thing. You can disagree with me all day long, but I think we still should be able to sit down and reasonably, even over a cup of coffee, have a reasonable discussion. Let me lay out my point of view and my facts and truths, and let you lay out yours also. And we should be able to come to not we're just going to agree to disagree type of situation, because that never solves anything. We should be able to come to some type of resolution where either you're changing your mind or I'm changing my mind. And it might be where I'm changing certain things and you're changing certain things. We're coming to a happy agreement over that, because what you said made sense. It's factual. Maybe something I said has made sense, made factual, so we can both adjust our thinking when it comes to that. But shouting down opponents, or worse, engaging in violence is an effort to silence them, is something entirely different. And it is. That we've gotten to the point where these people feel like so much of a victim that anybody, and I got a couple strikes against me. I'm white, I'm male, I'm 55 years old. People think I have white privilege, and they don't even know me. I got 3 strikes against me. I'm a male, I'm white, I've actually got 4. My age, because I don't relate with people, I guess, and my white privilege. And because of the narrative that they're laboring under, that's enough for them. If I fit in those categories, I should not be listened to. That I should be, if need be, violently engaged to quiet me. And folks, that's where we're at today. He goes on, Sean goes on to say in here, cultural evolution from honor to dignity. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if you remember what happened on July 11th, 1804, I'll give you a second to ponder that date, July 11th, 1804. If you guessed it was the duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, you were correct, okay? And this was over honor. It was a point of honor between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. And instead of sitting down and discussing this point of honor, under these circumstances, when honor is presumed to be besmirched, that something has to happen immediately. There is no discussing it. You have impugned my honor, you besmirched my honor, and justice needs to be satisfied. And back in the day, what happened was they got in a duel, and Alexander Hamilton died the next day because they were so hooked up on honor that you besmirched or you just smeared my honor all over the place and impugned it, that the only action was to me to defend my honor physically. not mentally in a debate with you and sitting down having a discussion, but physically, defending my honor. And a lot of times, and throughout history, if we hadn't changed, honestly, if Western culture had not changed from this honor society, we'd have killed each other out for the stupidest slights a long time ago. Western civilization would not have survived, and Sean talks about this in here. And then he goes on to talk about a culture in which dignity rather than honor as a standard bearer should be regarded as an appreciable improvement. This sordid moment in American history is a classic example of what social scientists calls a culture of honor. That is a culture in which one's reputation is made and maintained by protective attitude and aggression towards those who would attempt to exert their dominance or reputation. What others think of you is paramount. That's the honor thing. What others think of you is paramount. And the problem with that is, with what others think of you, if they don't know you, like if I tried to go speak on a college campus about freedom and liberty, which I'm passionate about, or, and that in my mind, being a Christian, in my mind, freedom and liberty also encompasses Christianity. Because through the blood of Christ, I've been made free and given liberty from my sins. And that has to, in my opinion, that has to be part of the conversation. I wonder how far I would get to the stage on a modern day college campus today if I was going to preach about freedom and liberty from a Christian political standpoint. I'm just saying, and this is where not that we've come full circle, but this is what happens when you're in like an honor society where what others think of you is paramount. And the problem with that is they don't know me. I bet you today, if I went out to Berkeley and tried to give a speech out there, I'm going to use UC Berkeley out in California because that seems to be the hotbed of anti-free speech in the country. Without even knowing who I am, without personally knowing who I am or what I'm about, lies can be told about me from the anti-freedom groups out there, from Antifa and these George Soros-funded Common Cause and indivisible groups and things like that. They could pass around lies about me, and without even checking to see if what they're saying about me is true or not, people pick up on that narrative because they want to be victims. And the lies could be, he's going to tell you, about freedom and liberty, and freedom and liberty is what's causing your problems today, not what's going to cure your problems today. And that would be an acceptable lie in their minds because it fits with their narrative, even though that's the furthest thing from the truth about freedom and liberty. And without even investigating, knowing who I am, they would shut me down. Now, if I was under the honor code, under an honor society, I would have to seek remedy to that because you just impugned my honor and because of what you think about me, even though you don't have all the facts. And to me, it doesn't matter if you have all the facts. You impugned my honor. And see, that's why I'm glad we went away from an honor society. We've gone into a culture it's more about dignity, but we got to talk about that too. Sean goes on to say such cultures are blessedly rare in Western world, having been largely supplanted by what sociologist Peter Berger called dignity culture. In dignity cultures, a person's worth is eternal and isolated from public opinion. What matters most is how one handles the minor slings and arrows that accompany many human interactions. A person with dignity does so quietly, usually by addressing the offending party directly and in private, if at all. And folks, we see a society where teen suicides are, in my opinion, more than one's a crisis level. Because they've been taught about their self-esteem, and that their self-esteem is an external thing. What people think of you is an external thing instead of an internal thing. My wife complains about this all the time. She goes, it's not that I don't care about what other people think about me, but if it's an uninformed opinion about me, if someone that doesn't know me, if Dave says something about me or characterizes me in a certain way, Dave knows me. And I understand that, and I can take that one or two ways. Either I can take that as constructive, if it's constructive criticism, then I'll take it for what it's worth and I'll think about it. And if it's valid to me and we sit down and have a discussion about it, then maybe I need to change the way I see things or what I'm doing, no matter what it is. I have folks do this all the time with me, especially when I restarted the program a couple of years back. I was personally attacking some folks, and a dear brother in Christ, Nick, pointed this out. Is that very Christ-like to be attacking the person instead of the problem? And he was absolutely right. I was attacking the person, not the problem. It wasn't Christ-like. It was constructive criticism. He wasn't doing it. He did it in private, didn't do it in public, and he corrected an action that I was and a road that I was going down that wasn't very productive. And so you see the difference in that. Nick knows me. We went to church for many years. We're not close friends, but we know each other. We're acquaintances. And, he was kind enough, and I've preached enough about this when I've given sermons that, we need to be able to sit down and talk to our brothers and sisters in Christ. If they're doing something wrong that's unscriptural, we need to be able to sit down and talk to them about that and say, hey, brother, sister, in private, not in public, not to embarrass them. This is what I see. Am I seeing this wrong? Correct me on this. But this is what I see you're doing that I don't think is very Christ-like or isn't in line with the scriptures or whatever it might be. And I think through that type of discussion, we actually save more souls than we lose. But in our society today, everything's public. The Antifa groups, the George Soros funded groups out there, they're trying to shut down free speech. They're doing it in a very public manner. And quite frankly, I think it's to their detriment, even though they don't realize that or they don't even acknowledge that. How could me protesting violently be a detriment to me? Well, the forgotten men and women of America see this and see this for what it is, that it's wrong and shouldn't be tolerated, and eventually it's not going to be tolerated. And the Antifa groups are going down a very, very dark path. And a lot of it's based on lies because they never sat down and really thought about their positions. They're believing lies that other people are telling them. And it's one of these things where you have to know the facts. You have to know the facts about Dan Clements if you're going to try to constructively criticize me or to try to pigeonhole me into some group that I'm not a part of. Yeah, I may be white, I may be male, and you may think I have white privilege. I never understood that white privilege because it's so subjective. I see other people that might have privilege over me because of their station in life or because some of the helps they get from government, like affirmative action. That's a privilege that they enjoy that I don't enjoy. And so, it's a whole host of things that folks don't know about each other. And in an honor society, that can be taken very personally, and most of the people that feel that their honor has been impugned need to deal with that directly and quickly and swiftly, and sometimes it may not be correctly. Okay? Sean goes on down through this article, dignity cultures are necessarily individualistic. And this is something that the anti-freedom crowd just cannot wrap their heads around. That God deals with each and every one of us as an individual. What Dave does or doesn't do doesn't affect my salvation. Unless, like the admonition to the Philippians when Paul said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. He wasn't talking about an individual. He was talking about the church, the local churches in Philippi, that they needed to help each other work out their salvation. If I see my brother Dave sinning, and he goes on sinning, and I don't step in to help him understand that he's sinning, I'm just as responsible as him because I didn't love him enough to tell him, hey, Dave, what you're doing is sinning. And the same way with me. If I'm doing something that's sinful and someone sees that and doesn't point that out to me, they'd be just as guilty. And it would show that they don't have much love for me by not helping me to avoid this type of sin. Okay? There's no widespread notion of common guilt in a dignity culture. Human agency is, by implication, paramount. It should be no surprise that for most of the 20th century, Western societies have evolved to prize dignity over honor. Let me be clear, this is a good thing. Most of us would recoil in horror at the thought of Mike Pence killing Jack Lew in a duel. I do not consider this point to be controversial. Some cultures are better than others, and Western culture today is certainly morally superior to its earlier institutions or incantations where slavery, sexism, and segregation were the norm. A culture in which dignity rather than honor is the standard bearer should be regarded as an appreciable improvement. Victimhood culture. But for many young Americans, and yes, this does appear to be a uniquely American phenomenon, the notion of quietly bearing one's trials has become passé. Getting back to the issue at hand, I believe that much of what we have witnessed on college campuses in recent years can be explained by the rise of what sociologists Bradley Campbell and Jason Manning call victimhood culture. They state a culture of victimhood is one characterized by concern with status and sensibility to slight combined with a heavy reliance on third parties. People are intolerant of insults, even if unintentional, and react by bringing them to the attention of authorities or to the public at large. Domination is the main form of deviance, and victimization a way of attracting sympathy. So rather than emphasize either their strength or inner worth, the aggrieved emphasizes their oppression and social marginalization. And there's a video that goes along with this that's actually in the article when you go to click on that. Watch the video again. These students are engaging in precisely the behavior Campbell and Manning described. They are demanding recognition of various victimhood statuses and are unwilling to engage in any form of dialogue with those with whom they disagree. The category of victim is a moral absolute. No one can argue in favor of its fallibility. But our understanding of victimhood culture and its relationship with the campus culture wars is incomplete without a commensurate recognition of what Nikki Halsam calls concept creep. Our understanding of what constitutes harm has broadened to include unintentional verbal slights rather than being limited to overt, deliberate physical aggressions. This can be seen throughout the footage in question, but it particularly visible at one point in the Yale Christakis row when complainants take a turn for the hyperbolic in response to an attempt by Christakis to appeal to the common humanity of everyone present. One student replies that such appeals is inappropriate because we're dying. And that couldn't be further from the truth. They're not dying because of these slights. It doesn't hurt you. And there's a comedian that says, since when did that old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me? Well, since when did words start really becoming harmful like sticks and stones? Okay, someone said something that you think is a microaggression, and the person that said it never meant it that way, but you took it that way. So because you're a victim, you think you have the moral high ground, so you're able to act out, and no one can say anything about it because you're a victim of this. I use the example, and I got in a discussion a week or so ago with some brethren on Facebook about this, about the use of euphemisms. And I try not to use euphemisms because somebody somewhere out there has taken a phrase you might be saying that you don't mean it to say anything else other than what it means, like, oh, for crying out loud in the nighttime. When I say that, I don't mean anything else but using that as an explanation about something somebody said. Oh, crying out loud in the nighttime, But someone might use that for something else. Might say, well, that means this, and that's a bad thing that it means. And so you've been sinning the whole time you've been using this euphemism. And I'm like, how can that be? And there are people out there thinking, how can that be? Same way with microaggressions. Probably a lot of things what I've said on this program today can be considered by those in the victimhood culture as being microaggressions. And they're not meant to be. They're not meant to be used as an aggression against somebody else. I don't do that. I don't play those type of games. If I'm going to aggress against you, there ain't going to be no question about if this is aggressive or not. None whatsoever. Euphemism. You're just trying to tell me that means something else, Dave. Euphemism. Euphemism. It depends on what part of the country you're from, Dave. You know, that if you're a hillbilly, and I lived on the outskirts of hillbilly heaven in the Appalachians down there in southern Ohio, it'd be euphemisms. It's like, is it creek or crick? I know. I'm microaggressing here, folks. Sean goes on and says, it's difficult to understand how a student at one of the world's top universities, well positioned to enter the halls of power after graduation, could reasonably be considered a member of an oppressed group, much less one that is being exterminated. Students at Yale, regardless of race or ethnicity, are among the cognitive and social elite. Cognitive and social elite. The idea that a simple email about Halloween costumes could constitute an external threat is nothing short of delusional. And that's, folks, I think he sums it up right there. This victimhood culture is delusional. These people are delusional in themselves, and they want other people to participate in their delusion. And it's just, to me, the victimhood culture in America is very offensive to me. It's not going to kill me. We can sit down and talk about it, but it is very offensive to me because it belittles actual victims, like rape victims, or victims of human trafficking, or victims of pedophilia. You name it. And what it does, the victimhood culture, especially on our college campuses today, it's just like calling everything rape years ago. When I first started listening, I was driving truck back then. I was first started listening to the Rush Limbaugh show, and I listened to him every day that I could in the truck if I could pick up the radio show on a local channel. He was talking about feminists, and I almost wrecked the truck. I was laughing so hard. There was an actual article about how men who eat red meat contribute to being overbearing against women. I know I messed that up, but contribute to the oppression of women and men who eat red meat. And I talked to my wife about that, and at the time I wasn't eating my steaks correctly. I was still getting them well done. It wasn't until a couple years later that I was down in Texas, and a cook at a restaurant wouldn't fix the steak well done. He said, this is too good a steak, too good a cut to do that. He goes, let me fix it the way it's supposed to be fixed, and I'll let you, and you let me know. If you don't like it, I'll cook it the way you want it. Well, it was medium rare, between medium rare and medium, but it was more closer to medium rare. Perfect. I never tasted a steak that good. I haven't looked back since. So I guess I'm contributing to the oppression of women. Now, this was a feminist group. I think it was NAGS or NOW or something like that put this out. And so they were saying that women who allow their men to eat red meat are contributing to their own oppression, which is absurd in my mind. But again, they were looking for victims to propel their ideas into the norm, into the main street of America. So I'm going to get down in here. Whether the culture of victimhood, the real world has a way of encouraging us to prize dignity over victimhood, advancing victimhood as a meritorious state while simultaneously expanding the criteria by which it is established means that those seeking social status are in constant competition. This oppression Olympics, as some have termed it, and there's a link to that in the article here. I found that very funny. That the Oppression Olympics link. means that marginalized status will become defined as in an increasingly diverse manner. In this way, victimhood culture sows the seeds of its own destruction. These snowflakes, as they've been called on campus, are not being prepared for the real world, because the real world doesn't act this way. The real world doesn't operate this way. And people like me who are more individualistic, and my dignity is internal, things like that. It's not an honor type thing. You can, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. You can call me all the names in the book if you want. And you know what? If you don't know me, I don't care. Now, if you know me and you start calling me names, I might take offense to it, and I might internalize them. It might hurt my feelings. But if you don't know me, I don't care. My wife thinks she doesn't see how I do that. I'm like, because they don't know me. I don't have a relationship with them. What does it matter? I'm not going to let them live rent free in my mind. So I'm just not going to give them the time of day, and that means I'm not going to give them the time my time to even think about them. Oh, okay, you called me something. Oh, big whoop-de-doo to me. You know, it doesn't affect my life one way or the other. I'm still going to live my life my way. You know, and God allows me free choice and freedom of choice and free will. And I'm going to live my life the way I see fit. And the way I see fit is following God and Jesus Christ in the New Testament. That's part of the way I see fit to live my life. And the other way I see fit to live my life is try to live as free and have as much liberty in my life and those friends around me as I possibly can, which means when I get on the show here and I talk about healthcare, I talk about it from a freedom liberty standpoint. You know, I got a little bit of a Facebook discussion this morning while I was doing some show prep because I needed to get some articles I saved on Facebook. And this article that I read that was on Vox, and like I said, I'm going to be doing a video on this. This woman and her now deceased husband and child, they had a very traumatic cancer that they went with. Her husband had brain cancer, had a couple surgeries, and how many rounds of chemo and radiation, and it cost all sorts of money. And they were saying in the article how Obamacare, if it wasn't for Obamacare, they'd have went bankrupt, but also in the same breath, and they actually had some GoFundMes to pay for medical expenses, to help pay for medical expenses. I'm like, well, wait a minute, you just said up here that wasn't for Obamacare and taking off the lifetime limits on this insurance, that you'd have went bankrupt, and then a couple paragraphs down, you're saying if it wasn't for the for carrying people out in the community, doing crowdsourcing, like GoFundMe or something like crowdsourcing to help you pay for medical bills, and you'd say if it wasn't for Obamacare, I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. If Obamacare paid for everything, why do you need crowdsourcing to help pay for medical bills? And then on the other hand, they were in this article, she was dismissing, and it was actually the wife of the husband. She has a podcast and she blogs and everything. She wrote this article that Vox put up on her website. And she was dismissing medical savings accounts. Well, we could have put all the money in the world that we could afford to put in there, and it still wouldn't have covered the cost. And she leaves out one of the most important aspects of the medical savings accounts is the catastrophic insurance that you can carry on that. And you can. I went back last night, I was just reading this article, and you can get MSAs, and they're not, for whatever reason, the federal government wanted to limit these and everything, but you can get a catastrophic rider on your MSAs that do not have a lifetime cap on them, whether you're under Obamacare or not. So if you want to go that route, and in today's society with all the diseases we have and the critical diseases we have that I think are caused by our nutrition and stuff, not all of them, but you know, it doesn't help that we're taking in all these chemicals all the time, and that's a whole nother story. But there's just a lot of inconsistencies in that story. And I pointed, and a friend of mine at church pointed out that she agrees with this woman about, you know, we pay taxes for schools that we don't ever use because she's a homeschooler. And we pay taxes for roads that we never go on. I was a truck driver, so I've been on a lot of roads in my life. Maybe not every one of them. Seemed like I was. And the same way with healthcare. And my point to them in this was that there's inconsistencies in the story. You need to read the story, and you need to be aware of these political inconsistencies because they leave out parts that make it look worse than what it actually is, truthfully. And we need the truth in order to have freedom and liberty. We have to. We have to have truth, and we have to have facts. And I made the and for whatever reason, people want to gloss over this. I don't understand this. Constitutionally, there is no constitutionally controlling authority in the controlling constitutional authority in the Constitution that grants the federal government power to govern anything over our children's schooling. None. That's at a state level. If the state wants to pass a tax to support the schools, I'm all for that because that's at the state level. That's something I can fight. If I don't agree with that, that's something I can fight on the state level in my state. If I can't get it changed and there's another state in the union out there that doesn't charge their citizens taxes and they still fund their schools and they got good schools, I might consider moving there because that state has it right. My state that I'm living at now doesn't. And that's the fun thing about federalism. And that's the cool thing about the United States. We're allowed to do that. We're absolutely allowed to do that. And then we got into the roads, and I said there's no controlling constitutional authority for the Department of Transportation at the federal level. There isn't. That's a state issue. Okay? Same thing with health care. And then, I said there's no constitutional controlling authority for the federal government to have anything to do with health care. That's a state power, and it should remain at the state levels. And then the next thing that came back was, well, there was a procedure to cost, if it wasn't for insurance, they wouldn't be able to afford it because it costs like this, a blood test costs like $2,400. Well, a couple things with that. I said this yesterday on the show. A friend of ours needs an MRI and has to wait a few weeks because of the MRI is so busy at the hospital. But there's a private clinic up in Williamsport that cash only, doesn't take insurance. And the cost of the hospital, I don't know what the total cost is because they have employer insurance and stuff like that. But their out-of-pocket cost is like $1,500 or what their insurance is going to pay. And I know it's a lot higher than that with the employer and everything. But anyway, let's just say it's $1,500. Well, this clinic for the same MRI that she would need that my wife had is only $350 cash out of pocket with no wait. She might get an appointment in a day or two and be in and out because they're not dealing with insurance. And the same way with other testing sites, there are cash-only testing sites out there that are very, very inexpensive that wouldn't cost $2,400 to get the blood test she needs. And so my answer to the folks on the feed on Facebook was there's so many layers in between the healthcare provider and the healthcare consumer that drives up the cost not only of insurance but of care. If we remove these layers and let the free market do its thing, which is it's freedom and liberty, folks, the free market, let it do its thing, you would see the cost of health care and the cost of health insurance come way down, like the HSAs. To me, an HSA or medical savings account, MSA, is the free market solution to health care and health insurance because it allows you to put money away that you would spend on office visits and stuff, and that would be cash. And there's a lot of doctors out there that are going to a cash only, no insurance, sort of a subscription, and I think that's great. And you get a lot for that subscription. You can buy different levels of that subscription to that doctor, and you can use your MSA to pay for that. Because MSA isn't an insurance. It's actually a cash savings account that you have. And then you have a critical illness rider that goes along with that, folks. I can't emphasize that enough. So we live in this victimhood culture, and this is something we need to address in our daily lives. This is something we really need to address the whole time, when we're talking about this whole thing. I didn't get to, I wanted to show you a couple memes real quick. And these are some libertarian memes, and we're going to end the show on these. The first one is, Jesus, I told you to feed the poor, not elect politicians to steal money from others to do it. I told you to feed the poor, not to create laws that steal from people to do it. And then the final one down here, Blessed are the tax collectors, for true charity comes not from the heart, but through the glory of government confiscation, things Jesus never said. And there is a conversation out there saying that Jesus would approve of all this charity that the government's doing in our place. And folks, that just could not be further from the truth. It just really couldn't. Well, that's the music, folks. It's the end of the show. This has been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.